forced out at 19 with nothing. I forged a successful life, proving my mother's dismissal was her greatest misstep. And then I personally informed her. My 19th birthday wasn't celebrated with cake or presents. It was marked by a duffel bag landing at my feet and my mother's icy declaration. You're an adult now, Ethan. Time to figure life out on your own. What she didn't realize was that by throwing me out, she wasn't ending my story. She was writing the first chapter of her own downfall, a quiet vengeance that would unravel everything she thought she had. I didn't get a cake for my 19th birthday, not even a simple happy birthday from the woman who gave me life. Instead, I got a duffel bag tossed onto the floor with a thud that echoed in my chest. Her gaze was like a literal winter wind, sharp and unforgiving, as she stood there, arms crossed, lips pulled into a tight, merciless line. You're an adult now, Ethan, she said, her voice devoid of warmth. Time for you to figure life out on your own. Then, she simply turned and walked back to the kitchen, as if she hadn't just cast her only son out into the cold, with no warning, no money, and not even a goodbye. I just stood there, 19 years old, wearing my worn-out sneakers and thrift store blazer, clutching a duffel bag I didn't even remember packing. She must have packed it the night before, while I was probably still in my bed, dreaming those naive teenage dreams of independence, not utter abandonment. I waited. I stood by that closed door, praying she'd reconsider, praying she'd at least offer a ride to the bus station, anything. She didn't. The front door didn't just close. It snapped shut with a finality that cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. Just like that, I was homeless. On my birthday. Happy birthday to me, right? Now, before you roll your eyes and think I'm just some entitled kid complaining about growing up, let me give you some context. My name is Ethan, and when this happened, I was still in high school. Yeah, 19, but still knee-deep in my senior year. I wasn't some troublemaker. I had decent grades, held down a part-time job at a local grocery store, and honestly, I mostly kept to myself. No wild parties, no getting into trouble. By every standard, I was the kind of kid who deserved a place to stay, at least until I graduated. But in my mother's warped reality, the day I officially became an adult was the day I officially stopped being her problem. Growing up, it was just us. My father? Never in the picture. The one time I dared to ask about him, when I was 8, the answer was a deafening silence followed by a cabinet door slammed so hard it rattled the entire apartment. I learned quickly, don't ask. After that, I just stopped. Mom worked a string of odd jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing, and sometimes she'd just disappear for a week or two, only to reappear with more cash and, well, more bruises. When she was actually around, she was usually either completely exhausted or simmering with a quiet rage. Often both. I tried. God, I tried so hard not to give her any reason to yell. I kept our little apartment spotless, learned to make simple meals, and became a pro at making excuses for her whenever she blew off parent-teacher conferences. But I quickly understood that love in our house wasn't a given. It was a tightrope act, always conditional. There were no I love yous, no hugs, no affection, just a constant barrage of rules, demands, and guilt trips. If I dared ask for new shoes, I was ungrateful. If I brought home an A, it wasn't an A+. If I was quiet, I was moody. If I spoke up, I was rude. The goalposts moved constantly, shifting with her mood, and no matter how hard I pushed myself, it was never enough. Still, that naive part of me, the one that desperately craved a mother's approval, held on to hope. Maybe turning 19 would be different. Maybe she'd finally see how hard I was trying, and a flicker of pride, however small, would show in her eyes. I wasn't expecting a big party. We couldn't afford one. But a quiet dinner, a peaceful evening, that's what I wished for. I was utterly gullible, foolish enough to believe she might actually care. Turns out, she had been waiting for that day, the day she could finally wash her hands of me for good. The night before my birthday, I came home from work and found her exactly how I dreaded, deep in one of her moods. She was chain-smoking by the window, pacing the living room like a trapped animal. I kept quiet, I knew better than to provoke her. But I still offered to reheat some leftover noodles. She just waved me off, silent and stony. Later, I heard her on the phone in her room, her voice low and fierce. I couldn't make out most of it, but one line, one chilling sentence, sliced through the thin walls and burrowed into my brain. He turns 19 tomorrow. I don't owe him anything. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, desperately trying to convince myself I'd misheard, that she didn't really mean it. But deep down, a cold, hard truth settled in. I knew. I think I'd known for a long time that she was just looking for an excuse, an escape. She wanted her life back, whatever fragmented vision that was, and I was just in the way. Her burden, her justification, her guilt. The next morning, there was no breakfast, no happy birthday. Just that duffel bag at my feet and those ice-cold words. You're an adult now. Discover life on your own. I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded, turned around, and walked away. I felt like I was leaving behind a house that had been shattered long before I stepped foot out of it. I walked 3 kilometers to a park I used to visit as a kid, found a freezing bench, and finally opened bag. Inside, 3 pairs of jeans for shirts, 1 worn-out sweatshirt, a toothbrush, and nothing else. The $25 I'd carefully hidden under my mattress? Gone. She'd taken that too. I guess she figured I wouldn't need it. That was it. My life, reduced to a few worn clothes and a missing $25. That was the beginning. The first, sharp, brutal cut. That night, I curled up in the back of a laundromat, hoodie pulled tight, trying to drown out the freezing air with the monotonous buzz of washing machines. The next week was a blur of survival, sleeping on park benches, scrounging for whatever food I could afford, sneaking showers at the gym. At school, I pretended everything was fine. My pride, and frankly my utter humiliation, kept my mouth shut. But I was exhausted, I was hungry, and teachers started to notice. I overheard whispers, "He looks unwell. Something's wrong with Ethan." But no one actually asked, until Mrs. Carson, my guidance counselor. She was one of the few adults who actually saw me, who looked me in the eyes and really meant it. One day she pulled me aside. "Ethan," she asked gently, "is everything okay at home?" I tried to lie, but the words just tumbled out. The whole messy, humiliating truth. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just listened. Really listened. And then she went to work. She helped me apply for emergency housing, got me lunch coupons through the principal, and even reached out to a local crisis support group for youth. I hated taking charity, hated needing help, but I had no choice. That small lifeline, that little bit of unexpected kindness, kept me alive. All this time, I heard nothing from my mother. No calls, no texts, no check-ins. She just vanished as if I never existed. I was out of her life, and that was exactly how she wanted it. But here's the thing. Lying in that cold shelter bed every night, I made myself a promise. A silent, burning vow. One day, she would regret every single word she said to me. One day, I would be so far above anything she could ever imagine for me that she'd have no choice but to watch. It wasn't about her approval anymore. I was long past wanting that. It was about her knowing she was wrong about me, about everything. And when that day came, I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight. I would simply smile, turn, and walk away. I didn't know how I'd do it yet, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I would make her regret it. Every single syllable. And the first crack in her facade, the first piece of my strategy, came just a few weeks later, when I discovered a truth about her she never expected me to learn. For weeks after she kicked me out, I clung to this desperate hope. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd snap out of it, that she was just anxious, terrified, overwhelmed. I clung to that illusion like it was my last breath, because the alternative, the idea that my own mother could throw me away like trash and simply not care, what did that say about me? But she didn't come around. In fact, the more I processed, the more chillingly obvious it became. She'd been orchestrating my departure for a long, long time. Mrs. Carson helped me get into a local youth shelter program. It wasn't glamorous, bunk beds, shared rooms, group meetings, but it was warm. It was safe. And for the first time in months, it felt like mine. I started to find some stability. I worked extra hours at the grocery store, took night shifts whenever I could. My social life vanished. My ability to care about it vanished too. Every spare moment was dedicated to sheer survival. There was no time to mourn, no time to sit with my sadness. Not yet. Not until that frigid Thursday afternoon in late January. It all began when I ran into Mrs. Parker, our old neighbor from the building. I was volunteering at a community center for some extra service hours, and she was out walking her tiny dog. She recognized me instantly, though I must have looked 10 years older than the last time she saw me. "Oh, my goodness, Ethan," she gasped, pulling her coat tighter. "Are you all right, sweetie? Your mom said you went off to college early." College? My stomach lurched. She hadn't even texted me. She nodded vigorously. "Yes, that's what she told everyone. Said you got a scholarship and left right on your birthday. She was just telling Mrs. Turner how proud she was of you. Becoming a man, starting your life." I just stood there, speechless. Proud? She hadn't even bothered to show up for the January graduation planning meeting where parents were supposed to RSVP for cap and gown payments. And here I was, standing in front of a neighbor who'd been fed this beautiful lie, while I was living in a shelter, eating instant noodles, and constantly worrying if my thrift store uniform smelled like disinfectant. That was the first devastating crack in her carefully constructed facade, and things just spiraled from there. Turns out, my mother didn't just toss me out. She replaced me. A week after my birthday, her younger sister, Aunt Rachel, supposedly visited from Florida. I wouldn't have known if one of the younger kids from the building hadn't DM'd me on Instagram. "Your cousin is living at your place now. What happened, Leowell?" Leowell. That was the kid's name. I didn't even know I had a cousin. But curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread, forced me to dig deeper. Aunt Rachel had a son, maybe 16, named Aiden. I recognized the last name from sorting mail in our building. Aiden, as it turned out, had a history, bouncing between group homes, trouble at school, minor thefts, all the things my mother used to accuse me of when she was angry. Things I never did. And now, he was sleeping in my bed, wearing my old sweatshirt, rummaging through the fridge I used to keep stocked with groceries I'd paid for. Meanwhile, my mother was uploading cheerful selfies with him. The captions read, "So proud of my nephew. New beginnings, red heart, #nephew. Not son." My existence as her son had been completely airbrushed out of her life. I felt like I was floating above my own shattered identity, as if someone had taken a hacksaw to my very foundation and left me balancing on splinters. The one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally had simply chosen to reinvent her life, and I was just erased. But the anger? That primal white-hot fury, that didn't come until I found the envelope. I was helping Mrs. Carson organize a mountain of mail in the school office, scholarship offers, flyers, report cards, the usual. And then I saw it, a thick, official-looking envelope with my name on it. It was from Millstone Technical College, dated December 2nd, delivered to my home address. And it was a full-ride scholarship for their business management program, complete with a monthly stipend and housing for low-income applicants. My birthday was December 17th. I stared at that paper for a full, horrifying minute before the truth slammed into me. My mom got this letter. She knew. She knew I had a way out. A real way out. And she hid it. She never gave it to me. My hands trembling, I folded the paper back into the envelope. "Mrs. Carson," I whispered, barely audible. "Can I ask you something strange?" She looked up. "Of course, Ethan. What is it?" "Is it legal?" I asked, for a parent to reject a college offer on their child's behalf. Her eyes immediately narrowed. "Ethan, what did you find?" I handed her the envelope. She read it once, then again, her posture stiffening with each word. She knew, I continued, fighting to keep my voice steady. She knew I had this, and she still threw me out. Mrs. Carson didn't say a word, but the tight set of her jaw told me everything. She promised to contact the school directly, and she did. But it was too late. The acceptance deadline had passed. They'd already moved on to the wait list. The administrator sounded genuinely sympathetic. If we'd heard from him in December, this would have been a done deal. But now, there was nothing. I walked out of that meeting in a daze, not just because I'd lost the scholarship, but because I'd never even had a chance to accept it. My mother hadn't just kicked me out. She had stolen my future. A way out. A chance at a better life. And for what? That's when the anger finally erupted. Not a loud, explosive rage, but a deep, humming fury that settled in my chest and vibrated through every cell. For the next few days, I moved through a fog. I went to work, sat in class, but my mind was a relentless loop, replaying every single time I tried to impress her. Every time I'd clean the kitchen spotless to avoid her yelling. Every A I'd brought home, clutching it like a lifeline, hoping this would finally make her see me. But she didn't see me. Not ever. She saw a scapegoat, a workhorse. And the moment I stopped serving her purpose, she replaced me without a second thought. What finally pushed me over the edge? What turned that simmering anger into something? Focused something dangerous? Aiden's birthday party. It was a Saturday, February 20th, and I only found out because someone tagged the apartment complex in a post. I followed the breadcrumbs like a bloodhound straight to her social media, and there it was. She'd thrown him a full-blown party. Balloons, a banner, and a freaking cake that read, "Welcome to the family, Aiden," in cursive icing. I watched it all unfold online. The videos, the group selfies, my mom drunkenly dancing with a red Solo cup like she was 21 again, and Aiden grinning, looking like he owned the place. I don't even remember making the decision to go there, but I found myself standing outside the building, fists clenched in my coat pockets, watching the party lights flicker through the windows. I wasn't going to go in. I refused to give her that satisfaction. But then I saw her step outside for a smoke, just like she always used to. Something inside me snapped. I walked up slowly. She didn't notice me until I was just a few feet away. When she finally saw me, she stopped. Then that fake smile, the one she used for teachers and landlords, plastered itself on her face. "Well, well," she drawled. "Look who finally grew a spine." I said nothing. She gestured toward the apartment. "You're not invited." "I figured," I replied, my voice flat. She took a long drag from her cigarette. "Still upset I fired you? Grow up, Ethan. Life's rough. I did you a favor." "You threw away my scholarship," I said, the words strained, forced through a tight throat. Her smirk vanished. "I found the letter. You knew I got accepted and you hid it." She scoffed a nasty sound. "I knew you'd muck it up. You couldn't even clean your room. Was I supposed to let you spend someone else's money on a dream you drop out of in a semester? You never gave me a chance." "I gave you life," she shot back, her voice rising. "And 19 years. That's more than I ever got from my parents." "You didn't give me anything," I retorted, stepping closer, my voice gaining strength. You took everything, and you're still doing it, but not for much longer." Her eyes narrowed, turning cold again. "Is this a threat?" "No," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "It's a promise." And with that, I turned and walked away. I could feel her stare burning into my back, but I didn't look back. Not once. That was the breaking point, the last time I saw her face to face. But it wasn't the last time she'd hear from me, because from that moment on, I stopped surviving and started planning. I'd love to tell you that after confronting my mother, some switch flipped, and I walked off into a metaphorical sunset, head high, heart strong, already halfway to a better life. But that's not what happened. What actually happened was I fell apart. On the outside, I kept going through the motions. Showed up for work, sat in class, nodded through meetings with my case manager. To anyone watching, I probably looked like just another tired teenager counting down the days until graduation. But inside, I was completely unraveling. That confrontation with my mother, her chilling coldness, her absolute certainty that I would fail. It didn't just hurt, it hollowed me out. Everything I had been holding together with duct tape and denial came crashing down. The rejection, the betrayal, the way she'd replaced me like an old piece of furniture. I couldn't stop thinking about how effortlessly she'd stripped away everything I'd worked for. Not just the scholarship, but my very belief that I mattered. And worst of all, for a while I believed her. I started showing up late for work, not because I didn't care, but because sleep wouldn't come. My mind would loop the same horrific memories over and over. Her telling neighbors I was off to college, the photos of her smiling with my replacement, that damn cake. Welcome to the family. Aiden mocking me from my own memories. I'd lie in that shelter bunk, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, wondering if she was right, if I was destined to screw everything up, if I truly was broken beyond repair. I failed 2 quizzes in a row, forgot my gym clothes, missed a meeting with my counselor. Small things, but they piled up, a constant reminder of my crumbling resolve. One Friday afternoon, I just skipped school entirely. I couldn't do it. I ended up sitting on a bench behind the strip mall near the grocery store, just staring at the cracks in the pavement until the sun dipped below the horizon. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything. I just sat there thinking, I can't keep this up. I can't keep pretending I'm fine. That was it. My absolute lowest point. But the funny thing about rock bottom is how utterly quiet it is. No one's cheering you on. No one's even watching. And certainly, no one is waiting for you to climb out. You just sit there, marinating in your pain, until you either give up completely or you decide, with every ounce of fight left in you, to move. That's what I did. I made one small move. I called Mrs. Carson. I don't even remember dialing her number, just her voice on the other end. Calm, warm, like someone flipping a light switch on in a dark room. I told her everything. Not just about my mother, but about how I felt, the crushing weight, the bone-deep exhaustion, the consuming shame. I expected a pep talk, you're strong, you're capable, but instead she just said, Ethan, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. And then she showed up. That spring, something finally began to shift. She started checking in every few days. Little texts. Did you eat today? Need help with homework? Want me to proofread that essay? These weren't grand gestures, but they were tiny lifelines, slowly pulling me out of the fog, reminding me that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible after all. I stopped fixating on proving my mother wrong and started focusing on proving myself right, that I was worth more than how she'd treated me, that I could build something, not out of spite or rage, but out of a quiet, stubborn belief that I deserved better. I threw myself into school, showed up early, stayed late, asked a million questions, took notes as if my life depended on it because it did. My grades soared, and I even started tutoring other students in math and economics. It wasn't about the money, I genuinely enjoyed it. Education became the first thing that was solely mine, and I excelled at it. My evenings were spent at the youth center, devouring articles on small businesses, investment strategies, tax breaks, anything that could give me an edge. I wanted to understand the world in a way my mother never would. A volunteer at the shelter, Jamal, noticed me always in the computer lab. He was an older guy, ex-military, no nonsense, and straight to the point. One day he sat down next to me and said, "You got hustle, kid. Ever thought about starting your own thing?" The idea lodged in my brain like a splinter. My own thing? I laughed it off at first. What could I start? I was broke, living in a shelter, no connections, no fancy degree. But Jamal kept pushing. He told me about how he used to flip used cell phones on Craigslist, starting with nothing but a cracked iPhone and turning it into a side hustle that paid his rent. It's not about starting big, he said. It's about starting smart. So I started smart. I noticed people at the shelter constantly needed basics: socks, toothpaste, razors, chargers, but they didn't have the time or energy to trek across town to cheap stores. I found a dollar store near my job that offered small bulk discounts. I bought a few items, brought them back, and resold them for just 50 cents more in the common room. People were happy to pay for the convenience. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I kept meticulous records, tracked profits, learned what people wanted, when they wanted it, and how to price it. Every single penny I made, I reinvested. I devoured used books on sales strategy and customer psychology. I watched endless YouTube videos on drop shipping and affiliate marketing. By that summer, I had a binder bursting with notes and a spreadsheet that made me feel like a Wall Street analyst. More importantly, I had confidence. Real, earned confidence. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from knowing you built something from nothing, and no one can ever take that away from you. I didn't invite anyone to my high school graduation in June, except for Mrs. Carson, who sat proudly in the front row, and Jamal, who cheered as if he'd raised me himself. There was no mother, no distant relatives, just me in a cap and gown, walking across that stage with a piece of paper that quietly declared, I mattered. I made it. For the first time in my life, it felt like I had a family. Not the one I was born into, but the one you find painstakingly when everything else falls apart. After the ceremony, I didn't cry. I just stood there looking out the crowd, the reality washing over me. I'd done it. I'd survived. I'd rebuilt. And I wasn't done yet. That fall, I enrolled in community college. Not Millstone Tech, no. My full scholarship was long gone, irrevocably stolen. But it didn't matter. I got financial aid, applied for every grant and local scholarship I could find, took out a small loan, and kept working. Evenings at the grocery store, weekends running my little supply stand at the shelter. I moved into a tiny, subsidized student housing unit. Just a mattress on the floor, surrounded by textbooks and boxes of dollar store toothpaste. It was mine, and I was happy, truly happy, because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, grade by grade. And by the time I turned 20, my online shop Packlight was running out of my dorm room. Nothing fancy, just curated care packages for students and shelter programs. Basic needs bundled together. I'd personalize them, add handwritten notes, even offer discounts to the very shelters where I'd once sought refuge. The promise I'd made myself still lingered, a low hum in the back of my mind. Orders started coming in, and word began to spread. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building something bigger, something undeniable. Despite all the progress, the grades, the growing business, this new life I was meticulously constructing, one thing I simply couldn't shake was that promise. The one I'd made to myself in that cold shelter bed. One day, she would regret everything. Because while I was steadily rising, I knew, deep down, that something else was happening on the other side of town. Something that was about to collapse. The thing about vengeance is, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't magically appear like in the movies, where the hero levels up overnight, gets a dramatic haircut, and launches some screaming confrontation that changes everything. No. True vengeance, the kind that really stings, demands patience, precise timing, and ruthless discipline. You don't win by yelling louder or throwing punches. You win by becoming so successful, so utterly undeniable, that the person who wronged you has no choice but to see you, to acknowledge you, and to regret every single choice that led them to that moment. And I was getting there. By the time I was 20, Packlight had truly taken off. What started as a humble box of toiletries in a shelter common room had blossomed into a steady e-commerce business. We had clean branding, curated care packages tailored for college students, low-income families, and shelters. I'd built a Shopify store, mastered basic SEO, and reinvested every single penny into stock and site design. But it was never just about the money. It was about forging something that no one, ever, could take away from me. I kept it quiet, though. No bragging. No flashy posts. Not even my professors knew the full scope of what I was building. I didn't want any eyes on me until I was ready. I could still vividly recall my mother's reaction when I confronted her about the scholarship. That cold, smug smirk that screamed, "You'll never be anything without me." I wanted to incinerate that image from my mind, and the only way to do that was to make her eat those words. But to do that, I needed more than just success. I needed a plan. And, strangely enough, it all began with Aiden. Honestly, I didn't care much for Aiden at first. He was just a pawn, a warm body for my mother to manipulate, parade around, and guilt trip into loyalty. I figured he'd vanish, just like everyone else in her life eventually did. But then, an email landed in my inbox from a girl I used to have classes with in high school. We weren't close, but her subject line instantly grabbed me. "Hey, is this your cousin?" Attached was a snapshot of a Reddit thread, one of those anonymous community boards for our town. The title screamed, "Aiden from Unit 14 observed taking phones from gym lockers again." My stomach dropped. I opened it, and the thread was full of blurry photos and accusations. A quick Facebook search of his full name revealed a trove of public posts. Angry rants from people who'd been scammed, PayPal chargebacks, even oddly specific lost dog fundraisers that felt completely out of place. Another comment mentioned he'd been banned from 2 different youth centers, and a third claimed he'd tried to sell stolen AirPods at a mall kiosk. I even found an old post from Florida warning people to watch out for this kid, known for stealing laptops from schools. I leaned back in my chair, just staring at the screen. It was all so sickeningly familiar. This was the person she kicked me out for. This was the person she gave my bed, my room, my life to. And then a profound realization hit me. My mother hadn't just betrayed me. She had gambled. She wanted to rewrite her entire narrative, to become the good, loving guardian of a troubled child, the kind of person she could brag about to neighbors and post about online. But she was too arrogant, too self-absorbed, to recognize that she was simply repeating the same destructive pattern. And that, right there, gave me my first real opportunity. Not for vengeance yet, but for information. I started watching Aiden from a distance. Online only. His social media, local Reddit pages, high school alumni group chats. He was so messy. The kind of kid who'd brag about the dumbest things. He'd post photos with wads of cash, claiming it was from legitimate side hustles. He made TikToks flexing in my old sneakers, the ones I'd saved up for my junior year, the ones I thought I'd lost in the move. He was parading around in pieces of my past, smiling like he'd earned them. And that's when I created the burner account. A fake Reddit profile, a new Instagram. Completely untraceable. I used it to quietly comment on threads, spark conversations about Aiden, ask loaded questions. Nothing obvious, just enough to pique people's interest, to plant seeds of doubt. I didn't need to fabricate anything. His own history was the bomb. I just needed to hand people the match. Then came David. I was working a shift at the grocery store one sleepy Sunday, bagging groceries at the end of the express lane. She didn't notice me. Her head was probably too high. But I noticed her and who she was with. A tall man, probably late 40s, in a suit jacket over jeans. He looked expensive, yet tried to appear casual, like he was attempting humility and failing miserably. They weren't holding hands, but their body language was undeniable. She was laughing, twirling her hair, using that phony, simpering giggle she reserved for when she wanted something. They walked right past me, and she didn't even glance my way. I waited until they were gone, then asked the cashier next to me, "Hey, do you know who that guy is?" "Oh, him," she said, eyes wide. "That's David. Comes in here a lot. He owns a bunch of IT stores downtown. I hear he's loaded." David Salvatator, owner of 3 electronic stores in our county, local commercials, LinkedIn, and an Instagram where he mostly posted about his stores, a couple of trade shows, and lately her. That was my second opportunity. I waited until she left, then asked my manager for an early break. Stepping outside, I immediately pulled out my phone and searched for David's name in our town. Buried deep in his Instagram feed, there was a post from Valentine's Day, a photo of a dinner plate, a candlelit table, and just visible at the edge of the frame, her hand wearing the ring she always wore. The caption read, "Best V-Day I've had in years. Lucky man." That confirmed it. She'd landed someone new, someone with money, and that meant she finally had something tangible to lose. That was my third opening. For the next 2 months, I meticulously built the pieces of what would become the ultimate setup. I revamped Packlight, got serious, registered the business, opened a P.O. box, applied for a micro-grant from a nonprofit that helped youth entrepreneurs, and actually got it. I used the funds to invest in inventory, automate parts of my fulfillment process, and even hired a part-time web designer from a freelancing site to polish the site and rebrand everything. Then, I created a special section, Packlight Partners, a program for businesses to sponsor care packages for youth shelters, complete with branded thank you notes, social media shoutouts, and a community partner badge. Guess who I contacted? David's Electronics Stores. I used a fake name, posed as a marketing manager, and sent a formal pitch via email, complete with mock-ups. I knew he'd bite. He was exactly the kind of guy who loved to appear generous. We went back and forth for a week, and eventually I got his confirmation. This looks great. I'm happy to donate some accessories and be featured. Just keep our brand visible. My girlfriend loves this kind of community work. His girlfriend, of course, had undoubtedly spun some elaborate lie about her past, about working with kids or running support groups. Whatever fairy tale she'd fed him. And now, she was about to be publicly linked to my company, the company built by the son she abandoned. But I wasn't done yet. I needed one more thing, receipts. So I started collecting them. Every Reddit thread, every photo of Aiden holding stolen goods, every comment from someone claiming he owed them money, every blurry gym security photo, every Twitter rant, every TikTok of him flexing cash. I built a comprehensive Google Drive folder, meticulously organized with captions and sources, all by date, and I backed it up 6 times. Finally, I ordered one of my own care packages, but this one contained something special, a typed letter, signed with my full name and address, addressed to David. Inside, I thanked him for supporting youth like me, and subtly mentioned how I had started the business after being kicked out of my home at 19. With absolutely no support from my family. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. I let the timeline, the tone, and the sheer emotional weight of the story speak for themselves. I wanted him to ask questions, and I wanted her to sweat, because now I had everything. I wasn't going to drop the bomb just yet. No, I wanted her to see who I'd become, what I'd painstakingly built from the ashes she'd left behind. I needed her to see the undeniable proof of her betrayal, amplified on a platform she couldn't possibly ignore. She was just beginning to build this new, shiny reputation for herself, and I knew I could demolish it with a single, brutal truth. That is when the real revenge would begin. The finest form of vengeance doesn't arrive in a blaze of glory or a screaming brawl in a parking lot. No, it walks in quietly, takes a seat at the table you built, and calmly waits for your adversaries to realize they're eating their own consequences. That, my friends, is precisely what I did. After David officially agreed to be a Packlight partner, I waited 3 long weeks before launching the campaign. Just enough time to set the stage. I updated the website, making it look incredibly professional, minimalistic, with clean lines, soft colors, and prominent text thanking David's stores for sponsoring care packages for underprivileged youth. Then, I added one final devastating touch, a spotlight story on the homepage, a personal essay titled, Kicked Out at 19. Now, I'm sending help to children like me. It was brief, no more than 600 words. No names, no dramatics, just my voice. Calm, clear, and crushingly honest. I told the raw story of the morning I turned 19. The packed suitcase, the slamming door, the chilling realization that I wasn't loved, only tolerated until I was no longer legally her responsibility. I wrote about sleeping in that laundromat, missing my scholarship offer, and the gut-wrenching discovery that I'd been replaced in my own home. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just told the unvarnished truth. At the end of the essay, I made sure to thank our new business partners, specifically including a local electronics company owned by a man who reminds me that there are kind, generous adults out there. I knew, with absolute certainty, my mother would see it. David followed Packlight's Instagram, and I made sure to tag him in the post that published the story. It quickly gained traction. Small accounts, nonprofit sites, a handful of local influencers reposted it. The very shelter where I'd once slept even commented, expressing their pride in me. 3 days later, I received a message from David. It was brief, just a few lines. "Hi, Ethan. I just read your story on the website. This is powerful stuff. Forgive me for asking, but is your mother's name Laura?" I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs, and finally typed, "Yes, she is." He didn't respond right away, but I knew. I had just thrown a carefully constructed bomb into his meticulously manicured picture of her. To be continued.